The stars above the Creel system were burning, not the stars themselves. Those cold, distant lights had watched wars come and go for 1 billion years. What burned were the ships. Dozens of them. Some were small fighters, spinning out of control with fire trailing behind them like wounded birds. Some were massive cruisers, cracked open like eggs, spilling light and metal into the black. This was the last stand of the Krael Coalition. For 6 years, the Coalition had fought the Voran Empire. 6 years of losing planets, losing fleets, losing hope. The Voran were not like other enemies. They did not ask for surrender. They did not want prisoners. They wanted the Coalition gone, erased from the star charts, forgotten by history. And today it looked like they would finally get their wish. On the bridge of the Coalition flagship Vantis, the air was thick with smoke and fear. Red lights flashed on every wall. Alarms screamed, but no one had the energy to react to them anymore. They had heard those alarms too many times today. Commander Inez Dral gripped the edge of her control panel so hard her knuckles turned pale. She was young for her rank, only 32 years old, but the war had aged her face far beyond her years. Dark circles sat under her eyes. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, and a thin line of blood ran down her cheek from a cut she didn't remember getting. "Status report," she said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. A young officer named Toma looked up from his station. His hands were shaking. "Commander, we've lost the Halon star. The Iron Wind is adrift. No power. We have 12 ships left. 12 out of the 60 we started with." Inez closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then she opened them again. "And the Voran fleet?" "Still forming up for the final attack," Toma said. "Scanners show. They're not even hurrying. They know we can't stop them." Inez looked out through the main viewport. Far in the distance, the Voran ships gathered like a pack of predators circling wounded prey. Black, sharp-edged vessels, built for nothing but war. There were hundreds of them, maybe more than 1,000, if you counted the smaller fighters. 12 ships against over 1,000. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution. Inez thought about her daughter, back on Keth Prime, one of the last free Coalition worlds. 6 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn smile. Inez had not seen her in almost a year. If the Voran break through here, she thought, Keth Prime is next, and there will be nothing left to stop them. She turned to her communications officer, a quiet woman named Sella, who had barely spoken all day. "Sella," Inez said, "send the signal, the last one." Sella's eyes widened slightly. "Commander, we already sent 17 distress calls. No one answered. No one is coming." "Send it anyway," Inez said. "If we die today, I want it written in the log that we asked for help until the very end." Sella nodded slowly and turned back to her station. Her fingers moved across the panel and a soft beep confirmed the message had gone out. A wide, desperate broadcast, thrown into the emptiness of space like a bottle tossed into an endless ocean. "This is Coalition flagship Vantis. We are under attack in the Creel system. Our forces are nearly destroyed. If anyone receives this message, please, we need help." No one on the bridge expected an answer. They had learned, after 6 long years, that the universe rarely answered such calls. On the Voran command ship, the mood was very different. High Marshal Kessun stood at the center of his war room, watching the battle unfold on a massive holographic display. He was a tall figure, his gray skin marked with the ritual scars of 40 years of conquest. His eyes, black and cold, showed no excitement, only patience. "The Coalition fleet is finished," said an officer beside him. "Shall we begin the final assault?" "Not yet," Kessun said. "Let them suffer a little longer. Let them understand in their final moments that resistance was always pointless." The officer bowed his head and stepped back. Kessun had crushed a dozen civilizations before this one. Each time the pattern was the same. First hope, then desperation, then silence. The Creel Coalition would be no different. In a few hours this system would be quiet, and one more name would be added to the long list of species the Voran Empire had erased. He almost felt bored. Back on the Vantis, the minutes crawled by like hours. The Voran fleet began to move, slow and confident, tightening the circle around the last coalition ships. Weapons charged. Shields flickered weakly on the Vantis, barely holding after so much damage. "Commander," Toma said, his voice cracking. "Enemy fleet is beginning final approach. Estimated time to weapons range, 4 minutes. Inez took a deep breath. 4 minutes. That was how much time she had left to think of something, anything, that could save her crew, her ship, her people. She thought of nothing. There was nothing left to think of. "All hands," she said over the ship's intercom, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "This is Commander Drawl. I want to thank each of you. It has been the honor of my life to serve beside you. Whatever happens next, we faced it together." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Somewhere behind her she heard Sella quietly crying. Then, Toma's console beeped. It was a strange sound, not one of the usual alarms. Toma frowned and looked down at his screen, confused. "Commander," he said slowly, I'm picking up something. A new contact. Very large. It just appeared at the edge of the system." Inez turned sharply. "Define large." Toma's fingers moved quickly across his panel and his eyes went wide as the data came in. "Commander, I don't think this is possible. The signature is massive. Bigger than anything in our fleet. Bigger than anything the Voran have too." For the first time in hours, something other than fear crossed Inez's face. It was confusion, and a tiny, fragile spark of hope. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The main viewport shifted, the image sharpening as the ship's sensors focused on the new arrival. What appeared made everyone on the bridge go completely silent. A fleet. Not a single ship. An entire fleet, emerging from what looked like a tear in space itself. A shimmering doorway that closed behind them the instant they passed through. Ship after ship after ship poured out, until the count reached into the hundreds. They were strange in shape, nothing like Coalition or Voran design, smooth, dark, and quiet, like they were built more for purpose than for show. "Identify them," Inez said quickly. Toma shook his head. His hands trembled over the controls. "I can't, Commander. They're not in any database. Not Coalition, not Voran, not any species we've ever recorded." Sella, wiping her eyes, looked up. "Commander, the distress signal. Do you think—" "I don't know," Inez said quietly. "But whoever they are, they arrived right after we called for help." On the Voran command ship, High Marshal Kessun's calm expression finally cracked, just slightly. "What is that?" he demanded. His sensor officer worked frantically at his station. "Sir, unknown fleet just arrived through some kind of transit gate. Numbers, approximately 300 vessels. Composition unknown. Species unknown." Kessun studied the shapes on the display. His scars twitched as his jaw tightened. In 40 years of conquest, he had never seen ships like this. They didn't look advanced. In fact, compared to the sleek, weapon-covered designs of the Voran fleet, these new ships looked almost plain, boxy, unremarkable. Some of his officers actually laughed. "Look at them," one said. "They look like cargo haulers, not warships." Another added, "Maybe it's a trade convoy that took a wrong turn." Kessun allowed himself a small, cold smile. "Whoever they are, they have arrived just in time to die alongside the Coalition. Helpful of them to save us the trouble of hunting them down later." He turned to his fleet commander. "Reroute 40 ships to intercept the newcomers. Full firepower. Show them what happens to those foolish enough to enter Voran space." "Yes, High Marshal." Back on the Vantis, Inez watched the unknown fleet with a mixture of hope and fear. She didn't know who they were. She didn't know if they had come to help, or if they were simply another threat, arriving to finish what the Voran had started. "Commander," Toma said suddenly, "the Voran are moving. 40 ships breaking off. They're heading straight for the new fleet." Inez's stomach tightened. If these newcomers were peaceful, if they were innocent travelers who had stumbled into a war zone by accident, they were about to be slaughtered. "Can we warn them?" she asked. Do we have any way to communicate? Sela shook her head. I'm trying every frequency we have, Commander. No response. I don't even know if they can understand us. On the screen, the 40 Voran warships surged forward, weapons glowing bright with charging energy. Compared to the strange new fleet, they moved like sharks, smelling blood in the water. Fast, aggressive, certain of an easy kill. The unknown ships did not scatter. They did not retreat. They did not even seem to change formation. They simply waited. They're not moving, Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander, they're just sitting there. Why aren't they running? Inez leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the view screen. Something about the stillness of that fleet unsettled her more than the sight of the Voran ships closing in. It wasn't the stillness of fear. It was the stillness of something that wasn't afraid at all. Range in 10 seconds, Toma reported, his voice shaking. 9, 8. The Voran ships opened fire early, a full wave of energy weapons streaking across the black toward the unknown fleet, a storm of destruction aimed at ships that still had not moved an inch. On the bridge of the Vantis, every single person held their breath. Sela whispered almost to herself, Please don't die. Whoever you are. Please don't die. The weapons fire crossed the last stretch of space and slammed into the front line of the new fleet in a blinding flash of light. The screen went white. For one full second, nobody on the Vantis bridge breathed. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the failing engines and the frantic beeping of a dozen consoles. Then the light faded, and what the crew of the Vantis saw next would change everything they thought they knew about war, about power, and about who, or what, had just arrived in the Kryll system. The light faded slowly from the main view screen of the Vantis. For a moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The bridge crew stared at the screen, waiting to see what was left of the battle. What they saw made no sense. The 40 Voran ships that had opened fire were gone. Not damaged. Not retreating. Gone. Where they had been just seconds ago, there was only empty space and a few drifting pieces of metal, tumbling silently in the dark. The strange new fleet had not moved. Not one ship had changed position. Not one had lost so much as a single panel of armor. They sat there in perfect formation, calm and still, as if nothing at all had happened. Toma, Inez said, her voice shaking slightly. Confirm what I'm seeing. Please tell me I'm wrong. Toma's hands moved fast over his console, rechecking every reading twice. His face had gone pale. Commander, 40 Voran warships, destroyed, all 40, in less than 2 seconds. That's not possible, Sela whispered. Nothing destroys 40 warships in 2 seconds. Not even a planet-killer weapon works that fast. Inez stared at the screen, her mind racing. She had seen many things in 6 years of war. She had seen ships explode, seen entire fleets wiped out over the course of long, brutal battles. But she had never seen anything like this. There was no buildup, no struggle. The Voran ships had simply fired their weapons and vanished. How? She said quietly. How did they do that? Nobody on the bridge had an answer. On the Voran command ship, the mood had changed completely. High Marshal Kessun stood frozen at his console, staring at the display where, moments ago, 40 of his best warships had been. His officers around him were silent, too shocked to speak. The confident smiles from earlier were gone. Report, Kessun said. His voice was calm, but there was a tightness in it now that had not been there before. His sensor officer's hands trembled as he checked the readings again and again. Sir, all 40 ships destroyed. There's no wreckage pattern that matches any weapon in our database, no explosion signature, no energy discharge trail. It's like they were simply erased. Erased, Kessun repeated slowly. Yes, sir. Kessun's jaw tightened. In 40 years of war, he had faced many enemies. Some had powerful weapons, some had strong shields, some had clever tactics. But he had never lost 40 warships in the time it took to blink. What is their weapon? He demanded. I want an analysis now. Sir, we don't know, the officer admitted. There's no visible weapons fire from their ships. No beam. No missile trail. Nothing. It's as if the attack simply happened, without a cause we can detect. A cold silence spread through the command room. For the first time in a very long time, Kessun felt something he had almost forgotten. It was not quite fear, but it was close. He looked again at the unknown fleet on the display. Those plain, boxy ships that his officers had laughed at just minutes ago. They did not look powerful. They did not look advanced. And yet 40 of his warships were gone. Pull back the remaining fleet, Kessun said. Full retreat from the newcomer's position. Maintain distance. I want full sensor analysis on those ships before we engage again. Sir, if we retreat, the coalition fleet may... I said full retreat, Kessun snapped. I will not throw away my entire fleet because of wounded pride. We will learn what we are dealing with first. The officer bowed quickly and relayed the order. Across the battlefield, the massive Voran fleet, still numbering in the hundreds, began to pull back from the unknown ships, putting distance between themselves and whatever had just happened. Back on the Vantis, the crew watched in stunned silence as the Voran fleet retreated. They're pulling back, Toma said, disbelief clear in his voice. Commander, the Voran fleet is retreating, all of them. Inez could hardly believe it. In 6 years, she had never once seen the Voran retreat from anything. They did not retreat. They did not fear. That was the whole reason the war had gone on so long. The Voran simply did not stop, no matter how many ships they lost. But now, for the first time, they were pulling back. What are they afraid of? Sela asked quietly. Inez looked at the unknown fleet, still sitting calmly in the middle of the battlefield, untouched and unmoved. I think, she said slowly, they're afraid of them. Minutes passed. The Voran fleet continued its retreat, forming up at a safe distance, far beyond what anyone would normally call weapons range. The unknown fleet still had not moved. Then, something changed. Commander, Toma said suddenly, one of the new ships is moving. Just one. It's heading toward us. Inez straightened in her chair. Show me. The screen shifted to show a single vessel breaking away from the unknown fleet's formation. It moved slowly, almost gently, toward the battered remains of the coalition fleet. Up close, it looked even more strange. Smooth metal, dark gray in color, with soft lights along its hull that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Are they hailing us? Inez asked. Sela checked her panel. No hailing signal, Commander, but... She paused, frowning at her screen. Wait, I'm picking up something. It's faint. It sounds like... words. Put it through, Inez said. A moment later, a voice filled the bridge. It was calm, and though the words were spoken in a language none of them had ever heard, the ship's translation systems worked quickly to process it. This is the human vessel Iron Dawn. We received your distress signal. Are there survivors aboard your ships who require medical assistance? The bridge fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was full of disbelief, and something else. Something the crew of the Vantis had not felt in a very long time. Relief. Human, Inez repeated softly. They call themselves human. They answered our distress call, Sela said, her voice breaking slightly. Commander, they came because we asked for help. Inez felt something tighten in her chest. 6 years of war, 6 years of loss, 6 years of sending message after message into the dark, hoping anyone would answer, and finally someone had. She took a slow breath and stood up straighter, trying to keep her voice steady as she replied. This is Commander Inez Draal of the Coalition flagship Vantis. We have wounded aboard. Many of our ships are without power. We did not expect... She paused, unsure how to finish the sentence. We did not expect anyone to come. We did not expect to survive this day. The voice on the other end responded simply. Understood, Commander Draal. Medical and repair teams are being dispatched to your fleet immediately. You are safe now. You are safe now. Inez had not heard those words in 6 years. She was surprised to find her eyes filling with tears. Across the system, more human ships began moving. Smaller vessels detached from the main fleet heading toward the wounded coalition ships. They moved with quiet efficiency, without any wasted motion, like they had done this many times before. On the bridge of the Vantis, Toma watched the sensor readings with wide eyes. Commander, I'm seeing more details on their ships now that they're closer. Their technology, it's strange. Some parts look almost simple, like things we would build, but other systems, I can't even understand what I'm looking at. The readings don't match anything in our physics models. What do you mean? Inez asked. I mean, Toma said slowly, it's like they're using two completely different levels of technology at the same time. Basic construction materials, but power systems and weapons that shouldn't be possible with what they're built from. Sella looked up. Maybe that's why the Voron didn't recognize the threat at first. Their scanners probably read the same thing. Simple design, simple materials. They judged the ships by how they looked, not by what was really inside them. Inez nodded slowly, thinking back to the confidence of the Voron fleet just moments before the attack. They had rushed in, expecting an easy kill against ships that looked weak and outdated. It had cost them 40 warships in under 2 seconds. They underestimated them, Inez said quietly, and it nearly destroyed their fleet. Meanwhile, aboard the Voron command ship, High Marshal Kesuun was receiving updated reports on the human fleet's composition and technology. Sir, his sensor officer reported, we're detecting the same technological pattern across all their vessels, simple materials, simple hull design, but something inside those hulls is generating power readings we cannot explain. Whatever weapon destroyed our 40 ships, it left no signature we can trace. Kesuun stared at the display, his mind working through possibilities. He had spent decades studying enemy fleets before engaging them, learning their strengths, their weaknesses, their patterns. But this meant this was different. This was an unknown he could not calculate. Options, he said finally. We could attempt a full fleet assault, one officer suggested. Overwhelm them with numbers. Even an advanced weapon has limits. Or we could retreat entirely, another said. Report back to the Empire. Let a larger force analyze this threat before further engagement. Kesuun considered both options in silence. Retreat meant admitting weakness, something the Voron Empire did not tolerate easily. But a reckless assault could cost him his entire fleet, just as it had nearly cost him 40 ships already. Send a message to Voron High Command, he said finally. Inform them of a new unknown species. Request additional forces and full analysis support. Until reinforcements arrive, we hold position at maximum distance. We will not engage the newcomers again until we understand what we are truly facing. The officer nodded and moved to send the report. Kesuun remained still, watching the calm, unmoving human fleet on his display. For the first time since this war began, he felt a small, uncomfortable question forming in his mind. What if we have found something we cannot defeat? He pushed the thought away. He was High Marshal of the Voron Empire. He did not entertain such thoughts. Not yet. Back aboard the Vantis, hours passed as the human fleet worked to stabilize the wounded coalition ships. Repair teams moved between vessels and small transport craft, patching hull breaches, restoring power systems, and treating the injured. Their efficiency amazed everyone who watched. Inez stood near the main viewport, watching human repair crews work on a nearby coalition cruiser. She was exhausted, but something had shifted inside her, a feeling she had almost forgotten how to have. Hope. Sella approached quietly, holding 2 cups of the thin, bitter coffee the coalition fleet still had in reserve. She handed one to Inez. Do you think they'll help us win the war? Sella asked softly. Inez took the cup, wrapping her hands around its warmth. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know who they are or why they came or what they want in return, but right now, she looked out at the human ships working tirelessly to save coalition lives. Right now, I don't care about the reasons. I just care that they came. Sella nodded, sipping her coffee in silence. Far in the distance, The Voran fleet remained still, watching, waiting, calculating their next move. And somewhere beyond the edge of the system, word of the mysterious new fleet was already beginning to spread, through coalition channels, through Voran communication networks, and soon, to every corner of known space. A new player had entered the war, and nothing would ever be the same again. But who these humans truly were, where they came from, why they had answered a call for help from a species they had never met, and what secrets lay behind their strange, deceptive technology, remained a mystery that would soon be answered, in the events still to come. 3 days passed since the human fleet arrived in the Creel system. In that time, the Coalition survivors had been moved to safety, repaired, and resupplied. The Vantis itself had been fully restored, its hull patched, its power systems rebuilt, its wounded treated by human medics who worked with quiet skill and asked for nothing in return. Commander Inez Draal stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the human fleet through the main viewport. In 3 days, she had learned very little about them. They answered questions politely but gave few details. They did not explain their technology. They did not explain where they came from. But they had saved her fleet, and for now that was enough. "Commander," Sella said from her station, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from the human flagship. They're requesting a meeting. In person." Inez turned, surprised. "In person? Not through the comm system?" "That's what they're asking, Commander. A representative wants to come aboard the Vantis to speak with you directly." Inez exchanged a glance with Toma, who looked just as curious as she felt. In 3 days, the humans had kept their distance, communicating only through short, polite messages. This was the first time they had asked for a face-to-face meeting. "Tell them they're welcome aboard," Inez said. "Prepare the main conference room." An hour later, Inez stood in the Vantis' conference room, waiting. She had changed into a clean uniform, the first she had worn in weeks that wasn't torn or stained with smoke. Beside her stood Toma and Sella, both looking equally nervous. The door slid open, and for the first time Inez saw a human in person. He was tall, though not unusually so. His skin was a warm brown color, his hair short and dark. He wore a simple gray uniform with no obvious markings of rank, though something about the way he carried himself suggested authority. His eyes were calm, steady, and, Inez noted with some surprise, kind. "Commander Draal," he said, extending a hand. "My name is Captain James Reyes, of the human vessel Iron Dawn. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Inez hesitated for a moment, unfamiliar with the gesture, then shook his hand carefully. "Captain Reyes, thank you for what your fleet has done for us. We would not have survived without your help." "We're glad we arrived in time," Reyes said simply. He gestured to the chairs around the conference table. "May we sit? I have some things to discuss, and I imagine you have many questions." Inez nodded, and the small group settled around the table. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Inez decided to ask the question that had been on her mind since the first moment the human fleet appeared. "Why did you come?" she asked. "You answered a distress call from a species you had never met, in a war that has nothing to do with you. Why risk your fleet, your people, for strangers?" Reyes was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "That's a fair question," he said. "The truth is, humanity has only recently begun exploring beyond our home systems. We've encountered other species before, but rarely have we seen a call for help go unanswered by everyone except us. When we intercepted your distress signal, it was difficult to ignore." "Difficult to ignore," Inez repeated. "That's all? No other reason?" Reyes gave a small, tired smile. "Commander, I won't pretend humanity is a perfect people. We have our own history of conflict, our own mistakes. But when we see someone asking for help and no one is coming, most of us find that hard to walk away from. That's really all there is to it." Inez studied him carefully, trying to judge whether he was telling the truth. After 6 years fighting an enemy who lied, manipulated, and destroyed without hesitation, trust did not come easily to her. but something in Reyes's expression felt genuine. "And your technology," she said. "Our scanners can't make sense of it. Simple materials, but impossible power readings. What is it that you're not telling us?" Reyes's expression shifted slightly, not evasive but thoughtful, as if deciding how much to share. "Humanity discovered something a while back," he said carefully. "A way to work with energy and matter that most species haven't found yet. It's not magic. It's science. Just science that took us down a different path than most of the galaxy. I won't pretend I can explain all the details in one meeting, especially the parts our engineers are still working out themselves. But I can promise you this. Our technology exists to protect, not to conquer. We have no interest in your territory or your resources." Inez wanted to press further, but something about the calm honesty in his voice made her hold back. She had learned, over 6 years of war, to recognize when someone was hiding something dangerous, and when someone simply had complicated secrets that weren't hers to demand. "Very well," she said finally. "Then let me ask you the question that matters most right now. The Voran Empire has retreated, but they have not left the system. What happens next?" Reyes's expression grew more serious. "That's actually why I asked for this meeting, Commander. We've been monitoring Voran communications since our arrival. They've sent a request for reinforcements to their high command. A significant force is being redirected toward this system." Toma leaned forward. "How significant?" "Our estimates suggest several thousand additional warships," Reyes said, "larger than anything we've seen from them so far. It appears the destruction of their 40 ships has convinced them this is a threat worth taking seriously." The room went quiet. Even after 3 days of relief and recovery, the reality of the war settled back over them like a heavy weight. "Several thousand," Inez said softly. "Captain Reyes, our fleet cannot survive an attack of that size. Even with your help. You won't need to fight them alone." Reyes interrupted gently. "That's the second reason I asked to meet with you today. Humanity is prepared to commit additional forces to defend this system, and to assist the Coalition more broadly in this conflict, if you're willing to accept our help." Inez stared at him, momentarily speechless. In 6 years, she had watched the Coalition beg for allies who never came. She had watched neighboring systems refuse to get involved, afraid of drawing Voran attention to themselves. And now, a completely unknown species was offering to fight alongside them against an empire that had crushed everything in its path. "Why?" she asked again, quieter this time. "Truly, Captain, why would you commit your people to a war that isn't yours?" Reyes considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Commander, I'll tell you something my grandmother used to say. She said that the true measure of a people isn't how they treat their friends. It's how they treat strangers who can offer them nothing in return. Humanity is still learning what kind of species we want to be out here among the stars. Helping you, when we have no reason to gain anything from it, that matters to us. Maybe more than you realize." Inez was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Then the Coalition accepts your offer, Captain Reyes, and on behalf of everyone who has died in this war and everyone still fighting to survive it, thank you." Reyes gave a small nod. "We won't let you down, Commander." Meanwhile, far beyond the Krail system, the Voran Empire was preparing its response. In the heart of Voran territory, on the massive capital world of Threxus, Empress Viel Threxa sat upon her throne, reading the report High Marshal Kesuan had sent 3 days earlier. Her advisors stood silently around her, waiting for her reaction. Empress Viel was not a young ruler. She had led the Voran Empire for over 60 years, expanding its borders across dozens of star systems, crushing every species foolish enough to resist. She had built an empire on fear and absolute military dominance. And now, for the first time in decades, a report had arrived describing an enemy fleet capable of destroying 40 warships without visible weapons fire. "Explain this to me again," she said, her voice calm but cold. 40 ships, destroyed. No trace of the weapon used. Her chief science advisor, a nervous older Voran named Drasic, stepped forward carefully. "That is correct, Empress. Our sensors detected no beam, no missile trail, No explosive discharge consistent with any known weapon technology. The ships were simply gone. And this species calls itself human? Yes, Empress. According to intercepted Coalition communications. Vile was silent for a long moment, her sharp eyes studying the holographic image of the strange, boxy human ships displayed before her. They looked unremarkable, almost primitive, and yet they had done something no enemy had ever managed to do to a Voran fleet. Send the 9th and 12th fleets to the Kryll system, she said finally. Full mobilization. I want this species identified, studied, and if necessary, eliminated before they become a larger threat to the Empire. Empress, Drassic said carefully, the 9th and 12th fleets combined number over 4,000 warships. Is such a force truly necessary against a single, unidentified fleet? Vile's cold gaze turned to him. 4,000 warships is not excessive, Drassic. It is cautious. We do not yet understand what we're dealing with. I would rather send an overwhelming force and win quickly than underestimate an enemy and lose an empire built over 300 years. Drassic bowed his head. Of course, Empress. I will relay the order immediately. As her advisors moved to carry out her command, Empress Vile remained seated on her throne, staring at the image of the human fleet a moment longer. Something about those calm, unmoving ships unsettled her in a way she couldn't quite explain, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. She pushed the feeling aside. The Voran Empire had never lost a war. It would not begin now. Back in the Kryll system, word of the approaching Voran reinforcements spread quickly through the Coalition fleet. Fear returned to many who had only just begun to feel safe again. 4,000 warships was a force larger than anything the Coalition had faced in a single battle throughout the entire war. But aboard the human flagship Iron Dawn, the mood was very different. In the ship's main command center, Captain Reyes stood before a large display showing the incoming Voran fleet's projected arrival time, just under 6 days away. Around him, his senior officers reviewed tactical projections and fleet readiness reports. 4,000 ship gear, said his second-in-command, a sharp-eyed woman named Commander Alicia Chen. That's a significant force, even for us. It is, Reyes agreed. But it also tells us something important. The Voran are afraid. An empire that sends this much force at a single unknown fleet isn't confident. It's compensating for uncertainty. Chen studied the tactical display thoughtfully. Should we request additional support from Earth Command? Reyes considered this for a moment. Send the request. It's always better to have reinforcements available, even if we don't end up needing them. But Commander... He paused, glancing at the display showing the Coalition's battered remaining fleet, still docked nearby for repairs. I don't think we'll need them, not for this. You're confident? I am, Reyes said simply. The Voran have spent decades fighting enemies who play by the old rules of war. Numbers, positioning, resource attrition. They've never fought someone like us before. And that, Commander Chen, is exactly the advantage we intend to use. Chen allowed herself a small, tight smile. Then let's make sure the Coalition understands what's coming too. They've spent 6 years being afraid. It's time they saw what real strength looks like. Reyes nodded slowly, turning back to the display showing the vast approaching Voran fleet, a force built to conquer, built to terrify, built on the assumption that overwhelming numbers always won the day. They were about to learn otherwise. 6 days, Reyes said quietly. Let's make sure we're ready. Outside, in the black emptiness of space, the human fleet began final preparations. Silent, efficient, and utterly calm, even as an empire's fury raced toward them across the stars. The final battle for the Kryll system was coming. And this time, humanity would not simply defend. They would show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. 6 days passed in the Kryll system, and every one of them felt heavier than the last. Commander Inez Drall stood on the bridge of the Vantis, watching the tactical display as it updated in real time. A massive red formation had appeared at the edge of the system 20 minutes ago. The Voran 9th and 12th fleets, arriving exactly as Captain Reyes had predicted. 4,000 warships, stretching across the display like a wall of death. "They're here," Toma said quietly, his voice tight with tension. Inez nodded slowly. Even after everything the humans had shown her, the destroyed 40 ships, the calm confidence, the quiet efficiency, the sight of 4,000 Voran warships still made her chest tighten with old, familiar fear. "Status of the human fleet?" she asked. Sella checked her display. 300 ships holding position at the center of the system. No change in formation. No visible preparation for battle. "No preparation," Inez repeated. She walked closer to the viewport, staring out at the distant, unmoving human ships. 4,000 enemy warships are approaching, and they're not even changing formation. "Maybe they don't need to," Toma said. Inez said nothing, but privately she wondered the same thing. Aboard the Voran command ship, High Marshal Kesun stood at the center of the war room, flanked by dozens of senior officers freshly arrived with the reinforcement fleets. The mood here was very different from 6 days earlier. Confidence had returned, bolstered by sheer numbers. "Report," Kesun said. "9th and 12th fleets fully assembled, High Marshal," an officer replied. 4,200 warships, ready for engagement. The human fleet remains stationary at System Center, 300 vessels. A murmur of quiet satisfaction moved through the room. 14-1. Even against an enemy capable of destroying ships without visible weapons fire, such odds seemed impossible to overcome. Their earlier attack destroyed 40 ships in under 2 seconds. Kesun reminded his officers, his voice cutting through the confidence in the room. "Do not mistake their numbers for weakness. Whatever weapon they used, we do not yet understand it." "With respect, High Marshal," said one of the newly arrived fleet commanders, a younger officer named Vex. "Even an instantaneous weapon has limits. No fleet of 300 can destroy 4,000 ships before we close the distance and overwhelm them with sheer volume of fire. We should advance immediately before they can prepare a stronger defense." Kesun studied the young commander for a moment. He didn't share the man's confidence, not fully. The memory of those 40 vanished ships still sat uneasily in his mind. But Empress Vale's orders had been clear. Identify the threat and eliminate it, if necessary. Waiting indefinitely was not an option available to him. "Full fleet advance," Kesun said finally. "All ships, maximum weapons range. We end this quickly." Across the massive Voron formation, 4,000 warships began moving forward, engines burning bright as they surged toward the small, unmoving human fleet at the center of the system. Aboard the Iron Dawn, Captain Reyes watched the approaching Voron fleet on the main display with calm, steady eyes. "They're advancing," Commander Chen reported. "Full fleet, all 4,200 ships, moving at maximum speed." "Understood," Reyes said. "Bring the fleet to standard defensive formation. No offensive movement until they're within engagement range." "Yes, sir." Around the command center, human officers moved with quiet efficiency, none of them showing the tension that gripped the coalition fleet watching from a safe distance. This was not their first battle. It would not be their most difficult one either. "Captain," Chen said after a moment, "Commander Drahl is requesting to observe the engagement from a secure channel. She says the coalition fleet deserves to see what's coming, one way or another." Reyes considered this briefly, then nodded. "Grant her access, let them watch, let them." On the Vantis, Inez watched through the newly opened channel as the Varun fleet closed the distance minute by minute toward the calm, waiting human formation. Her hands were clenched at her sides. "Entering weapons range in 30 seconds, Toma reported, reading data from the shared human sensor feed. Inez said nothing. She simply watched, her heart pounding, as 6 years of terror bore down upon 300 ships that did not so much as flinch. 15 seconds. The Vorun fleet's weapons began charging, thousands of individual weapon signatures lighting up across the tactical display like a swarm of angry fireflies. 10 seconds. Sella's hand found Inez's arm, gripping tightly. Neither of them looked away from the screen. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Voran fleet opened fire. 4,200 warships unleashed everything they had. Beams, missiles, plasma cannons, every weapon system available, all aimed at the small human formation. For a moment, the space between the two fleets was filled with so much weapons fire that it looked like a second, artificial sun had ignited in the void. And then, just as before, everything went white. The light lasted only a second. When it faded, the tactical display updated, and every person watching, coalition and human alike, stared at the numbers in stunned silence. 4,200 Voran warships. Gone. Not damaged, not scattered. Gone, as if they had never existed at all. The 300 human ships remained exactly where they had been, untouched, unmoved, their formation perfectly intact. That's... Toma's voice failed him completely. He stared at his console, rechecking the numbers again and again, as if they might change if he looked hard enough. They didn't. Sella had gone completely pale, her grip on Inez's arm slowly loosening as shock took hold. 4,000 ships, she whispered. Gone. In 1 second. In one. Inez stood frozen, staring at the empty space where an entire Empire's warfleet had existed just moments before. 6 years of fighting the Voran Empire. 6 years of losing ships, losing planets, losing people she loved. And it had ended, truly ended, in a single silent flash of light. She didn't know whether to feel relief or fear of a power she still could not understand. Perhaps, she realized slowly, it was both. Aboard what remained of the Voran command structure, a handful of ships that had been held back from the main assault as a rear guard, High Marshal Kessun stared at his display in horrified silence. High Marshal, his censor officer said, voice trembling badly. The fleet. Both fleets, they're gone. All of them. There's nothing left. Kessun did not respond. He could not. 40 years of conquest, of victories, of an empire that had never known true defeat. And in the span of one single second, over 4,000 of his empire's finest warships had simply ceased to exist. Commander Vex, the young officer who had pushed for immediate advance, stood pale and shaking near the back of the command room. How? He managed to say. How is this possible? Kessun finally spoke, his voice hollow. I don't know. I don't think we were ever meant to know. He turned to his communications officer. Signal to Empress Vale. Tell her. He paused, searching for words to describe what he had just witnessed. There were none adequate. Tell her the 9th and 12th fleets have been destroyed. Tell her we have found something the Empire cannot defeat with force alone. The officer nodded slowly and moved to send the message, hands still shaking. Kessun looked once more at the empty space on his display, where an Empire's power had vanished in an instant. For the first time in his long career, he felt something close to true fear. All remaining ships, he said quietly. Full retreat. Return to Empire space immediately. We are done here. Back aboard the Iron Dawn, the mood remained calm, almost quiet, despite the scale of what had just occurred. Captain Reyes watched the retreating remnants of the Voran rearguard on his display, his expression unreadable. Enemy forces retreating, Chen reported. No further hostile contacts detected in system. Understood, Reyes said. Stand down from combat readiness. Begin recovery operations. I want full sensor sweeps of the area and reach out to Commander Drahl. Let her know the system is secure. Yes, Captain. As his officers moved to carry out his orders, Reyes allowed himself a small, quiet breath. The battle had gone exactly as he expected. It always did when humanity's true capabilities were involved. But he understood something his officers, focused on the tactical victory, might not fully appreciate yet. This was only the beginning. Hours later, Inez Drahl stood once again in the Vantis's conference room, facing Captain Reyes. The exhaustion of 6 years of war still lingered in her eyes, but something else had joined it now, a mixture of gratitude, awe, and quiet uncertainty. "You destroyed over 4,000 warships," she said slowly, "in a single second. Captain Reyes, I have to ask again, what exactly is your fleet capable of?" Reyes considered his answer carefully, the same way he had during their first meeting. "Commander, I understand you have questions, many of them probably, that I still can't fully answer today, but what I can tell you is this: the Voran Empire will not soon forget what happened here. And whatever comes next, whatever they decide to do, humanity is prepared to stand with the Coalition for as long as this fight continues." Inez studied him for a long moment. "And after this fight? After the Voran Empire, assuming it can even be defeated? What does humanity want, in the end?" Reyes was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Commander, I think that's a question best answered over time, through actions rather than promises. For now, all I can offer you is this. We are here. We intend to stay for as long as you need us. What comes after? We'll figure out together." Inez nodded slowly, extending her hand once more, the same way she had 6 days earlier. This time, there was no hesitation. Then on behalf of the Coalition, she said, "Welcome to the war, Captain Reyes, and thank you for everything." Reyes shook her hand firmly. "We're honored to stand with you, Commander Draal." Far beyond the Kriel system, on the throne world of Threxus, Empress Vielle Threxa received the report of her empire's greatest defeat in over 300 years. She sat in silence for a long time after reading it, her advisors too afraid to speak. Finally, she looked up, her cold eyes fixed on the star map before her, a map that for the first time in her long reign marked a species the Voran Empire did not understand and could not yet defeat. "Humanity," she said quietly, testing the word. "A name we will need to learn well." Her chief advisor, Drassic, bowed his head. "Empress, what are your orders?" Vielle was silent for a long moment, staring at the small, unremarkable shape of a human warship displayed on her screen, a shape that had, in a matter of days, ended the lives of over 4,000 of her empire's finest warriors, and the confidence of an empire that had never known true fear. "Gather everything we know," she said finally. "Every scrap of data, every intercepted transmission, every eyewitness account. I want to understand this species before we face them again. Because make no mistake." Her voice hardened, cold and resolute. "We will face them again, and next time, the Empire will be ready." Across the galaxy, word of the battle at Kriel began to spread. Through Coalition worlds desperate for hope, through Voran territories gripped by uncertainty, and to countless other species watching quietly from the shadows, wondering what this new, mysterious power in the stars truly meant for the future of the galaxy. For Commander Inez Draal and the survivors of the Coalition, it meant hope, for the first time in 6 long years. For High Marshal Kessun and the shattered remnants of the 9th and 12th Fleets, it meant humiliation, and the beginning of a fear that would haunt the Vorun Empire for years to come. And for humanity, quiet, patient, and far more powerful than anyone in the galaxy had yet realized, it meant only the beginning of a much larger story. A story that was only just getting started.